A small town. A massive blizzard. A teenage girl who stepped out the door and never returned. For months, everyone searched, but the snow kept its secrets. Then spring came, and what they found when the snow melted wasn't what anyone expected. Some mysteries aren't meant to stay buried forever. Briar Walsh woke to a world of white. Overnight, the blizzard had transformed Pinecrest, Maine, into a snow globe, the kind her sister Melody kept on their shared dresser. She pressed her nose against the frosted window. Snow was still falling, big fat flakes swirling like tiny dancers in the wind. "Melody, wake up!" Briar shouted, bouncing onto her sister's bed. "School must be cancelled. There's got to be 3 feet of snow out there." 16-year-old Melody groaned and pulled her quilt over her head. 5 more minutes, squirt. But it's the biggest snow ever. Briar tugged at the blanket. "Mom said the radio called it the blizzard of the century." Melody peeked out with one eye. "The blizzard of 1985, she corrected, but she was smiling now. "Fine, I'm up." Downstairs, Mom was at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a kiki, steaming mug. The radio crackled with static as the announcer confirmed what Briar already knew. All schools in Piscataquis County were closed. "Yes!" Briar pumped her fist in the air. Dad came in stamping snow from his boots. "It's still coming down hard. I've cleared a path to the shed, but it'll need doing again in an hour." He kissed Mom on the cheek. "Morning, girls. Some storm?" "Huh?" Melody slid into her chair, reaching for the cereal box. "They're saying it's the worst since '52. "Your grandfather talked about that one," Mom said. The snow buried their barn door. Briar could hardly eat, too busy planning her snow day. "Can we build a snow fort? Or go sledding on Harper's Hill? Or hold your horses," Dad laughed. "Nobody's going sledding in this. The wind would blow you to Canada." The lights flickered, and everyone froze. After a few seconds, they steadied. "Power might not last," Dad warned. "I'll get the kerosene lamps ready." After breakfast, Briar and Melody bundled up to help shovel. Briar's snowsuit made her feel like a stuffed marshmallow, but Melody looked grown up in her blue wool hat and bright yellow mittens that stood out like sunflowers against the white landscape. Outside, the world was muffled and strange. Their house, usually bright blue, was now just a snow-covered lump on Maple Street. The trees were bent under the weight of snow. The wind whipped snowflakes into tiny tornadoes. "It's like we're the only people left in the world," Briar whispered. Dad handed them each a shovel. "Welcome to your snow day activity." They had just cleared half the driveway when Melody suddenly stopped. "I should check on Ms. Fallow," she said, leaning on her shovel. "She lives all alone and her heat went out last week." Ms. Fallow was their elderly neighbor who lived 3 houses down. She always gave them molasses cookies and told stories about Pinecrest when she was young. Mom frowned from the porch. "Can't it wait until the storm passes?" "She might be scared." "Mom, I'll take her some of the soup you made yesterday." Melody was already heading toward the back door. "It'll only take 20 minutes, promise." "I don't think," Dad began, but Melody cut him off. "Dad, she has no family. What if she needs help?" Dad and Mom shared one of those grown-up looks that said they were having a silent argument. Finally, Dad nodded. "Straight there and straight back. Take the walkie-talkie." Inside, Melody filled a container with Mom's chicken soup. She stuffed the bulky walkie-talkie into her coat pocket. "Can I come too?" Briar asked, already reaching for her boots. "Not today, Squirt," Melody said, zipping up her coat. "Stay and finish your Snow Angel army." "But next time," Melody promised. She knelt down and whispered, "When I get back, I'll show you something amazing I found last week. It's our secret, okay?" Briar nodded, her disappointment fading. Melody always kept her promises. At the door, Melody turned back. "I'll be back in 20 minutes. She adjusted her blue hat over her dark curls, pulled on her bright yellow mittens, and stepped out into the swirling snow. That was the last time Briar saw her sister. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Mom kept looking out the window, biting her lip. "The walkie-talkie's not working," Dad said, fiddling with the static. "I'm going to check Ms. Fallows." He returned 20 minutes later, his face pale beneath his frost-covered beard. "She's not there. Ms. Fallows says she never came." Mom dropped the mug she was holding. It shattered on the floor, brown tea seeping between the tiles like tiny rivers. "Maybe she got lost in the snow," Briar suggested, her voice small. But everyone knew Melody couldn't get lost in Pinecrest. She knew every street, every shortcut. Dad called Sheriff Pike. Soon, neighbors were trudging through snowdrifts, calling Melody's name. Search parties formed despite the howling wind and falling snow. The blizzard erased footprints as soon as they were made, swallowing all traces of where someone might have walked. Briar wasn't allowed outside, so she pressed her face against the window, watching flashlights bob like fireflies in the darkness. She kept thinking Melody would appear any minute, stomping snow from her boots, laughing about taking a wrong turn. But night fell, and the house grew quiet except for Mom's muffled crying from the kitchen and Dad's low voice on the phone. "Don't worry," Briar whispered to Twigs, the teddy bear Melody had given her for her 9th birthday. "She's just stuck somewhere because of the snow. When the blizzard stops, they'll find her." She crawled into Melody's bed, surrounded by her sister's things, the books on the nightstand, the half-finished friendship bracelet, the snow globe from their trip to Boston. Everything waited for Melody to return. "She promised to come back," Briar told Twigs as she pulled the covers up. And Melody always keeps her promises. But as the wind howled outside her window, and the searchlights grew dimmer in the distance, a cold feeling settled in Briar's stomach that had nothing to do with the winter storm. The blizzard of 1985 had taken Melody, and Briar somehow knew that nothing in Pinecrest would ever be the same again. 3 days had passed since the blizzard had taken Melody. 3 days of Briar jumping at every sound, hoping it was her sister coming through the front door. 3 days of watching her parents' faces grow more hollow, more afraid. The snow had finally stopped falling, but Melody was still missing. "We've covered the entire east side of town," Sheriff Pike said, spreading a map across their kitchen table. His uniform smelled like wet wool and coffee. "Today we'll send teams to check the creek again. The ice might have—" "She wouldn't go near the creek," Mom interrupted. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep. Maybe both. "Melody knows better." Briar sat on the stairs, listening. Adults always talked more freely when they thought kids weren't around. "Martha," the sheriff's voice dropped lower. "We have to consider that she might have fallen through the ice or been buried in a drift. With this much snow," Dad's fist hit the table. "She's alive. My daughter is alive." Briar hugged her knees tighter. Of course, Melody was alive. She had promised to show Briar something amazing, a secret. Melody wouldn't leave without sharing that secret. At school the next day, everything felt wrong. Ms. Rodriguez had put a vase of paper flowers on Melody's empty desk. Kids stared at Briar in the hallway, whispering behind their hands. "I heard she ran away with some boy from Deerfield," Amber Collins said during lunch, loud enough for Briar to hear. "My mom said she had a secret boyfriend." "That's stupid," Briar snapped. "She was going to check on Ms. Fallow." "Then why didn't she get there?" Amber asked. Some other kids nodded. "Maybe someone took her," whispered Tommy Blackwell, his eyes wide. "My dad says sometimes strangers come through town and—" "Shut up!" Briar shouted, pushing her lunch tray away. The cafeteria went quiet. "You don't know anything." She ran to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall until the bell rang. Melody didn't have a secret boyfriend. She would never leave without saying goodbye. Something bad had happened, but nobody was listening to Briar. After school, she watched from the living room window as another search party gathered. Men and women in bright orange vests trudged through the snow, carrying long poles to poke into drifts. Dogs sniffed at Melody's scarf, then tried to follow a scent that the blizzard had long since erased. "Can I help search?" Briar asked Dad as he zipped up his heavy coat. "Not today, honey." He kissed the top of her head. "Stay with Mom." But Mom was just a ghost drifting through the house, picking up Melody's things and putting them down again. The phone rang constantly. Relatives, neighbors, volunteers. Nobody had any news. That night, Briar couldn't sleep. The moon made the snow-covered yard glow blue like the bottom of a glacier in one of Melody's science books. Clutching twigs. The bear. She crept down the hall to her sister's room. Everything was exactly as Melody had left it. Bed half made, a sweater tossed over her desk chair, homework unfinished on her desk. Mom couldn't bring herself to tidy up, as if keeping the room the same would somehow bring Melody back. Briar sat on the edge of the bed, wondering what the amazing secret was that Melody had wanted to show her. Her sister was always finding interesting things: arrowheads by the creek, a bird's nest with speckled eggs, once even an old coin from the 1800s. She opened Melody's desk drawer, looking for clues. Nothing unusual, just school supplies, a half-eaten chocolate bar, some friendship bracelets. But when she looked under the bed, she spotted a small notebook wedged between the wall and the mattress, Melody's diary. Briar hesitated. Melody would be mad if she knew Briar was snooping, but Melody wasn't here, and maybe the diary held answers that could help find her. Heart-pounding, she pulled it out and opened to a random page from October. Saw the car again today. Third time this week. Dark blue sedan, just sitting there across from school. When I looked over, it drove away. Probably nothing, but weird. Briar frowned. Melody had never mentioned a strange car. She flipped to November. Definitely feel like someone's watching our house. Told Dad, but he just said it's my imagination. Maybe it is, but the car was back again yesterday. The entries for December were mostly about school and friends, but then came January, just 2 weeks before the blizzard. Found the perfect place today. Old shed behind the factory. Nobody ever goes there. Fixed it up a little. My own secret. Spot where I can think and draw. Haven't told anyone, not even Briar yet. We'll show her soon, though. Was this the amazing thing Melody wanted to show her? A secret hideout? Briar's heart beat faster as she turned to the final entry, dated the day before Melody disappeared. Something strange is happening. Can't explain it here. If anything happens to me, look for the blue ribbon. That's where I've hidden everything. I know. Blue ribbon? What blue ribbon? Briar flipped through the remaining pages, but they were blank. The diary ended with that cryptic message. From downstairs came the sound of the front door opening. Dad's heavy boots in the hallway. Mom's anxious voice. "Anything?" "Nothing today," Dad replied, his voice hollow. "Pike's calling in state police. Tomorrow." They're bringing more dogs." Briar quickly shoved the diary under her shirt and tiptoed back to her own room. She slid the diary under her mattress, her mind racing. Melody had been worried about something before she disappeared. A watching car, a secret place, a blue ribbon hiding… What? The adults thought the blizzard was responsible for Melody's disappearance. A terrible accident in the snow. But Briar now suspected something else had happened. Something connected to these diary entries. She would find this secret hideout at the old factory. She would look for the blue ribbon. But most importantly, she would keep the diary secret for now. The grown-ups were too busy searching snowbanks to take Briar's theories seriously. They'd say she was just a kid making up stories to cope with her sister being gone. But Briar knew better. She had a real clue now, and tomorrow she would start her own investigation. Because if anyone was going to find Melody Walsh, it would be her little sister. Outside, the temperature dropped again, freezing the top layer of snow into a hard, glittering crust. Pinecrest remained locked in winter's grip, its secrets buried deep beneath the ice and snow. January turned into February, but winter refused to loosen its grip on Pinecrest. New snow fell every few days, covering the town in fresh layers of white. The plows created mountains of dirty snow on street corners, some taller than Briar herself. And still, Melody was missing. The bright orange search vests appeared less frequently now. The state police had come with their dogs and special equipment, but found nothing. The local newspaper ran Melody's picture on the front page for 2 weeks, then moved it to page 3, then stopped running it altogether. Briar overheard Sheriff Pike telling her parents what nobody wanted to say out loud. "At this point, we need to prepare ourselves. When spring comes and the snow melts…" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. At home, silence stretched between her parents like ice. Dad spent hours staring out windows, as if Melody might suddenly appear in the yard. Mom went through the motions of cooking and cleaning, but sometimes Briar would find her in Melody's room, holding her daughter's sweater, crying so quietly. Briar almost couldn't hear it. School wasn't much better. Kids stopped whispering when Briar walked by, which was somehow worse. Their silence felt like pity. Only Ms. Ortiz, her teacher, treated her normally. After class one day, she gave Briar a small blue notebook. "Sometimes it helps to write down your feelings," she said, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "When my brother was sick, I filled 3 of these." "Is he better now?" Briar asked. Ms. Ortiz's smile faltered. "No, honey, but writing helped me understand what I was feeling." Briar didn't want to write about feelings. Instead, she turned the notebook into her detective log. On the first page, she wrote, "Clues to find Melody." 1. Secret hideout at old factory. 2. Blue ribbon hiding something. Important? 3. Dark blue car watching our house. She needed to search the factory. But how? It sat at the edge of town, and with all the snow, she couldn't bike there. Plus, Mom barely let Briar out of her sight these days, as if afraid she might disappear too. Briar needed help, and she knew exactly who to ask. "No way," Theo Miller said at lunch the next day. "The factory's haunted. Everyone knows that." Theo had been Briar's friend since kindergarten. He knew every ghost story and urban legend in Pinecrest. "It's not haunted," Briar whispered, showing him Melody's diary entries. "Look, she fixed up a shed there. I need to find it." "Even if it's not haunted, it's dangerous," Theo argued. "There's broken glass and rusty metal everywhere. Plus, it's got to be 3 feet of snow between here and there." "I don't care. My sister left clues, and nobody else is looking for them. Theo studied her face. You really think she's still alive? The question hung between them. Briar had been avoiding thinking about it directly. I don't know, she admitted, but I need to find what she was trying to show me. Theo sighed. Fine, but we wait until some of this snow melts, maybe March, and we tell someone where we're going. We can't. Tell anyone, they'll stop us. Then I'm not helping. Briar knew when she was beaten. Fine, we'll tell someone, but not until March. That night, while her parents watched the news downstairs, Briar searched Melody's room again. She looked in every drawer, under the mattress, behind posters, anywhere a blue ribbon might be hidden. Nothing. She was checking the closet when she noticed something odd about Melody's jewelry box. The wooden box sat on her dresser, where it always had, but Briar realized she'd never looked inside since the disappearance. Heart pounding, she opened it. Among the cheap necklaces and earrings lay a folded piece of paper, tied with a thin blue ribbon. Found you, Briar whispered. She carefully untied the ribbon and unfolded the paper. It was a hand-drawn map of Pinecrest. Most of it looked normal. Main Street, the school, their house on Maple Street. But on the edge of town, where the abandoned factory stood, Melody had drawn a big red X. Underneath, in her sister's neat handwriting, My Special Place. Don't tell anyone. Briar's heart raced. This confirmed it. The factory hideout was where Melody had wanted to take her. But why keep it so secret? And what about the creepy car she'd mentioned? A soft knock on her door made Briar jump. She quickly folded the map and slipped it into her pajama pocket. Briar, dinner's ready, Mom called. Coming! Downstairs, the kitchen felt too bright. After the dim quiet of Melody's room, Dad pushed food around his plate without eating much. Mom kept glancing at Melody's empty chair. Mrs. Fallow brought over another casserole, Mom said, trying to sound normal. That's nice, Dad replied, his voice flat. Briar watched them. These sad strangers who used to be her laughing parents. She wanted to tell them about the diary, the map, the blue ribbon. But something held her back. They wouldn't understand. They'd tell her to stop making up stories, to accept that Melody was gone, and Briar couldn't accept that. Not yet. That night, she added the map to her detective notebook and made a plan. She would wait for warmer days, for some of the snow to melt. Then she and Theo would follow the map to the factory and find Melody's hideout. Outside her window, Pinecrest lay frozen under starlight, the snow glittering like diamonds. Somewhere beneath that beautiful cold blanket, Briar was sure, lay the truth about what happened to her sister. February brought no relief from the cold. The Walsh family settled into a routine shaped by Melody's absence. Empty chairs at dinner, phone calls that made everyone freeze with hope until it became clear it wasn't news about her, and the gradual, painful process of learning to speak, in present tense about someone who might be gone forever. Briar began watching people more closely. She noticed how Sheriff Pike's visits became shorter, how her parents' friends brought casseroles but stayed only briefly, as if sadness might be catching. She observed how the mail carrier would hurry past their house, no longer stopping to chat about the weather. But mostly, she watched Mr. Crane. Douglas Crane had moved into the yellow house across the street last summer. He lived alone and kept to himself. Dad said he'd moved from Boston after retiring early. He never joined the neighborhood barbecues or stopped to talk when collecting his mail, and, Briar realized with a jolt one morning, he had never joined the search parties for Melody. Everyone else in Pinecrest had helped look for her sister. Even old Mrs. Garfield, who needed a cane to walk. But not Mr. Crane. In fact, during the first days after Melody vanished, he had kept his curtains closed, tight. Briar started her own surveillance operation from her bedroom window. She recorded Mr. Crane's comings and goings in her detective notebook. February 12th, left house at 8:15 a.m., returned 5:30 p.m., carrying grocery bags. February 13th, no movement all day. Lights on until 10 p.m. February 14th, car gone when I woke up. Not back by bedtime, nothing seemed unusual, but something about Mr. Crane bothered her. Maybe it was the way he always checked over his shoulder before getting into his car. Or how he never waved to neighbors. Or maybe it was his car, a dark blue sedan, just like the one Melody had written about in her diary. One evening, as darkness fell early the way it does in Maine winters, Briar spotted Mr. Crane carrying something out to his car. She pressed her face against the cold window glass, straining to see. It looked like a shovel? Yes, definitely a shovel. He put it in his trunk, then drove away with his headlights off until he reached the main road. Who goes out with a shovel? At night, in the middle of winter? At dinner, Briar couldn't contain herself. "I think Mr. Crane is hiding something." Mom looked up from her untouched meatloaf. "What do you mean, honey?" He never helped look for Melody. "And tonight, I saw him take a shovel and drive away with his lights off." Dad put down his fork. "Briar, I know you're trying to make sense of all this, but Mr. Crane is just a private person. He's probably going to help a friend with their driveway." In the dark? With his headlights off? Her parents exchanged one of those adult looks, though, kind that said Briar was being silly. "I'll mention it to Sheriff Pike tomorrow," Dad said, clearly just to make her feel better. "But try not to let your imagination run wild, okay?" Briar stabbed at her peas. They didn't believe her. Nobody believed her. The next morning, Sheriff Pike's patrol car parked in front of Mr. Crane's house for exactly 7 minutes. Briar watched. From behind her curtains as the sheriff knocked, went inside briefly, then left with a wave. After school, Dad told her, "Sheriff Pike talked to Mr. Crane. He goes out at night to photograph stars. It's his hobby." The shovel was to clear a spot in the woods where he sets up his telescope. "Did Sheriff Pike see the telescope?" Briar demanded. "Well, no. Mr. Crane said it was at his friend's house for repairs. But there's no reason not to believe him." Briar thought there were plenty of reasons not to believe him, but she kept them to herself. 2 days later, Briar's kickball sailed over their fence during a rare afternoon warm enough to play outside. It landed in Mr. Crane's backyard. "I'll get it," she called to her dad, who was clearing ice from the gutters. Mr. Crane wasn't home. His car was gone. Briar pushed open the gate to his backyard, but stopped short. Unlike every other garage in Pinecrest, which stood open most days as people rummaged for shovels or sleds, Mr. Crane's garage was secured with a heavy padlock and chain. Who locked? Their garage in a town where some people didn't even lock their front doors? As she retrieved her ball, something yellow caught her eye. A small piece of fabric was caught on a nail sticking out from Mr. Crane's wooden fence. Briar tugged it free. It was a torn scrap of bright yellow yarn, exactly the same color as Melody's mittens. Heart hammering, Briar stuffed it in her pocket and ran back to her yard just as Mr. Crane's car pulled into his driveway. His eyes followed her all the way to her front door. That night, Briar compared the yellow scrap to Melody's other mitten, still sitting on the shelf in the mudroom. The color matched perfectly. She knew she should tell her parents or Sheriff Pike, but they hadn't believed her about the shovel, and they probably wouldn't believe her about this either. They'd say lots of people had yellow mittens, or that the Oitiu scrap had been there since fall. Briar added the fabric to her detective notebook, now bulging with clues. March was still weeks away, but she couldn't wait that long to investigate the factory with Theo. Not with Mr. Crane acting so suspicious. From her window, she watched as lights glowed behind Mr. Crane's garage door. What was he doing in there, so late? What was he hiding behind that padlock? And most importantly, did he know something about Melody's disappearance? Briar made a decision. Tomorrow she would tell Theo they needed to move up their plans. Snow or no snow, they had to find Melody's hideout at the factory. Because if her sister had been watching Mr. Crane, and if he had discovered this, maybe he was the reason Melody had vanished during the blizzard. The yellow scrap seemed to glow in the dark as Briar finally drifted off to sleep, her dreams filled with snow and secrets, and a sister who had promised to return. March arrived bringing slightly warmer days. Snow began melting in patches, revealing the first hints of grass and mud beneath. Roads cleared enough that kids rode bikes again, splashing through slush puddles and leaving zigzag tracks on wet pavement. "We're going today," Briar told Theo during lunch. "After school." Theo nearly choked on his chocolate milk. "Today? But there's still snow everywhere." "Not as much. And look," Briar pointed out the cafeteria window, "the sun's actually shining. My mom will kill me if I come home with wet shoes again." "This is about my sister, Theo." Briar's voice got quiet. "I found a piece of her yellow mitten on Mr. Crane's fence. The same Mr. Crane who drives a dark blue car like the one Melody wrote about." Theo's eyes widened. "For real? Did you tell Sheriff Pike?" "Nobody believes me. But you do, right?" Theo hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I do." After school, they met by the bike racks. Theo had brought his backpack filled with expedition supplies, a flashlight, Band-Aids, a chocolate bar, and walkie-talkies he'd gotten for Christmas. "The factory's 2 miles away," he said, handing Briar one of the walkie-talkies. "Keep this on Channel 3. They pedaled through town, past houses with melting icicles dripping from rain gutters. The roads grew narrower and less cleared as they approached the edge of Pinecrest, where the abandoned Sawyer paper mill stood like a brick ghost against the gray sky. The factory had closed 10 years before Briar was born. Its windows were mostly broken, and a chain-link fence with no trespassing signs surrounded the property. But kids had long ago discovered places where the fence had been cut or pushed down. There, Briar pointed to a gap between the fence and a large oak tree. They hid their bikes in some bushes and squeezed through. The factory grounds were a mess of snow-covered rubble, broken pallets, and rusty machinery parts. They followed the map from Melody's jewelry box, which showed a path around the main building, to a smaller structure behind it. "I think that's it," Briar said, pointing to what looked like a small shed about 50 yards beyond the factory's loading dock. Unlike the crumbling main building, this shed seemed in better shape, with intact windows and a door that wasn't hanging off its hinges. They trudged through the slushy snow, careful to watch for hidden obstacles. The shed door had no lock, just a simple latch. Briar took a deep breath and pushed it open. "Whoa," Theo whispered. Sunlight streamed through the small windows, illuminating a space that was definitely not an abandoned shed anymore. A threadbare but clean rug covered most of the floor. Crates had been turned into shelves holding books, snacks, and art supplies. A camping lantern sat on an overturned bucket that served as a table. Old cushions made a cozy seating area in one corner. "This is amazing," Briar said, turning slowly. Melody made her own little house out here. Every surface showed her sister's touch. Postcards and magazine cutouts tacked to the walls, a jar of colored pencils neatly arranged by shade, even a small vase holding dried wildflowers. It was like stepping into a piece of Melody's mind. "Check this out," Theo said, pointing to a cardboard box labeled Bird Drawings. Inside were dozens of sketches: crows perched on telephone wires, a cardinal on a snowy branch, hawks soaring above the factory. Melody had dated each one. The most recent was from just 3 days before she disappeared. "She was really good," Theo said. Briar nodded, a lump in her throat. She'd known Melody liked to draw, but she'd never seen so many of her sister's works. Why had she kept this place secret for so long? Beneath the bird drawings lay a sketchbook with "weird stuff" written on the cover. Briar opened it carefully. The first pages showed the factory from different angles, then close-ups of strange markings on the building's walls, and then a detailed drawing of a dark blue sedan. Melody had written beneath it, "Same car, 3rd time this week. License. Begins with WR7. The next page showed a man standing beside the car, but his face was turned away. He wore a dark coat and hat. Melody's notes read, "Watching our street again. Taking pictures? Called sheriff once, but car was gone when he arrived." "Briar," Theo said in a strange voice. "I think that's Mr. Crane's car." Before Briar could answer, they heard the unmistakable sound of a car engine. Through the small window, they saw a dark blue sedan pulling up to the factory's side entrance. "Hide!" Briar whispered, frantically gathering the drawings. They crouched behind the cushions in the corner, hardly daring to breathe. Footsteps crunched in the snow outside, coming closer to the shed. The door handle jiggled. Briar's heart pounded so loudly she was sure whoever was outside would hear it. She clutched Theo's arm as the door swung open. Cold air rushed in. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. Mr. Crane. He didn't come in, just stood looking around the small space, as if searching for something. After what felt like forever, he closed the door and his footsteps moved away. They waited 5 agonizing minutes before Theo whispered, "I think he's gone." Carefully, they peeked out the window. The blue sedan was still there, but Mr. Crane was now entering the main factory building through a side door. "We need to get out of here," Theo said. "Now." But Briar had spotted something they'd missed earlier, a small wooden box tucked under the makeshift table. Quickly, she pulled it out and opened it. Inside lay an old-fashioned key with a blue ribbon tied around it. "The blue ribbon," she breathed. "This is what Melody wrote about in her diary." "What's it for?" Theo asked, eyeing the window nervously. "I don't know, but it must be important." She pocketed the key and took one last look around the hideout. On a shelf near the door was a small stack of photos. Actual printed ones, not digital. She grabbed those too. "Let's go before he comes back." They slipped out of the shed and ran as quietly as possible through the slushy snow, staying close to the factory building to remain out of sight. When they reached the fence, they squeezed through and retrieved their bikes, pedaling away as fast as they could. They didn't stop until they reached Willow Creek Park, halfway back to town. Panting, they collapsed onto a damp bench. "That was too close," Theo gasped. "Do you think he saw us?" "I don't think so." Briar pulled out the photos she'd grabbed. "Look at these. Most were more bird pictures, but one showed the factory from a different angle than Melody's drawings. Strange lights appeared in the sky above it." "UFOs?" Theo asked, eyes wide. "Don't be stupid. It's probably just the sun reflecting off something." But the last photo made them both freeze. It showed Mr. Crane talking to another man beside the dark blue car. Unlike the sketch, this photo clearly showed Mr. Crane's face as he handed something to the other man. "We need to show these to Sheriff Pike," Theo said. "For real this time." Briar nodded slowly, still staring at the key with its blue ribbon. "What did it open?" And why had Melody hidden it in her secret place? One thing was certain. Mr. Crane was connected to all of this somehow. He'd been watching their house. Melody had been watching him. And now he was searching her hideout. Whatever secret Melody had discovered before she vanished, Briar was getting closer to uncovering it too. I'm telling you, Dad, Mr. Crane is hiding something. Briar spread the photos across the kitchen table. After much debate with Theo, she had decided to show her parents everything. Dad examined the photos carefully, his tired face more animated than it had been in weeks. And you found these in a shed behind the factory? Briar nodded, then pulled out the scrap of yellow yarn. I also found this caught on Mr. Crane's fence. It matches Melody's mittens exactly. Mom sat down heavily, her hand shaking as she touched the yellow scrap. And you're sure this is from her mitten? Look at the color, Briar said, and the pattern of the yarn. It's the same. Dad picked up the photo showing Mr. Crane by his car. This is definitely him. For the first time since Melody disappeared, Briar felt like they were listening to her. Really listening. I also found this. She placed the key with its blue ribbon on the table. Melody wrote in her diary that if anything happened to her, we should look for the blue ribbon. Dad studied the key. Looks old, not like a house key. Maybe it opens something at the factory, Mom suggested, her voice trembling with hope. Dad reached for the phone. I'm calling Sheriff Pike. Within an hour, Sheriff Pike was sitting at their kitchen table, examining everything Briar had found. He didn't dismiss her discoveries like before. He asked questions, took notes, and studied the photos with a magnifying glass he carried in his pocket. I'll get a search warrant for Crane's property, he said finally, and I'll send deputies to check that shed behind the factory. What about the key? Briar asked. We'll try to figure out what it opens. Old-fashioned like this? Might be for a storage room or a cabinet somewhere. That night, Briar watched from her window as patrol cars parked outside Mr. Crane's house. Officers went. Inside carrying flashlights, more officers searched his garage and yard. They were there for hours. Briar fell asleep, waiting. But the next morning at breakfast, Dad's grim face told her everything. They didn't find anything connecting him to Melody, he said gently. His car matches the one in the photos, but that's not a crime. And they found his yellow work gloves with a tear that might have caused the fabric on his fence. But the photos show him talking to another man, but we don't know who or why. Pike says there's nothing illegal about taking pictures of a factory. Briar couldn't believe it. What about the shed? Did they find any of Melody's fingerprints? They did, Mom said, but that only proves Melody was there, which we already knew from her drawings. The key? Briar asked desperately. Dad shook his head. Nothing yet. After they searched the factory and couldn't tie Mr. Crane to any wrongdoing, Sheriff Pike closed the investigation again. Briar's clues, so promising just yesterday, had led nowhere. That afternoon, Mr. Crane showed up at their front door. Dad answered, his body blocking the entrance. What do you want, Crane? To clear my name, Mr. Crane said. His voice sounded different than Briar expected. Softer, with a slight accent she couldn't place. And to speak with your daughter. Absolutely not, Mom said, appearing beside Dad. Please, Mr. Crane said. I understand why she's suspicious of me, but there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Briar peeked around her parents. Mr. Crane looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. He wasn't the monster she'd imagined lurking across the street. It's okay, she told her parents. I want to hear what he says. They moved to the living room, Briar sitting between her parents on the sofa. Mr. Crane perched awkwardly on the edge of an armchair. "First, I want to say how sorry I am about your daughter," he began. "I should have joined the search parties, but I don't do well in crowds. You were seen at Melody's hideout yesterday," Dad said flatly. Mr. Crane nodded. "After Sheriff Pike questioned me the first time about my car, I became worried. Your older daughter had been watching me for weeks, taking photos. I wanted to know why." "So you admit you were watching our house?" Mom asked. "No, that's not—" Mr. Crane sighed. "I wasn't watching your house. I was watching the Prescott home next door. Tom Prescott and I work for the same company. I was doing surveillance for a corporate matter." "In a residential neighborhood?" Dad didn't sound convinced. "Industrial espionage happens everywhere, Mr. Walsh. I'm retired from active fieldwork, but I still consult occasionally." He turned to Briar. "Your sister noticed me sitting in my car. She became suspicious, rightfully so, and started watching me back. I believe she followed me several times." "Then why were you at her hideout?" Briar demanded. "After the police searched my house, I realized how this all looked. I went to the factory to see what she might have discovered about me. I was trying to clear my name." Briar didn't know whether to believe him. It sounded plausible, but something still felt off. Mr. Crane stood up. "I never harmed your daughter. I hope they find her." He walked to the door, then paused. "That key you found. Did they tell you what it opens?" Briar shook her head. "It's an old storage cellar key. There's an abandoned farm property north of town with a storm cellar that uses keys like that." He left without another word. As soon as the door closed, Dad was on the phone to Sheriff Pike, reporting what Mr. Crane had said about the key. Briar sat quietly, thinking. Mr. Crane had seemed sincere. But how did he know what the key opened? And why mention the abandoned farm? She had a terrible feeling that time was running out. Whatever had happened to Melody was connected to that key and the place it unlocked, and Briar was the only one who seemed willing to keep looking. Sheriff Pike sent deputies to check the abandoned farm property that Mr. Crane had mentioned, but they found nothing unusual. Just an empty, crumbling house and a padlocked storm cellar they couldn't open without a warrant. Since they had no evidence connecting it to Melody, they couldn't get one. "We need to move on," Dad told Briar gently that evening. "The police have done everything they can. But the key, sweetie, keys like that were common in old houses around here. Mr. Crane was probably just trying to send us on another wild goose chase." Briar couldn't believe what she was hearing. After briefly taking her seriously, her parents were giving up again. Even Sheriff Pike had stopped returning their calls. That night, Briar made a decision. She had to see what was in that storm cellar, herself. The next morning, she told her parents she was spending the day at Theo's house. Instead, she met him at the park. "Are you sure about this?" Theo asked when she explained her plan. "Breaking into a storm cellar sounds dangerous." "It's not breaking in if we have the key," Briar argued. "Besides, I'm just going to look. If I find anything suspicious, I'll call Sheriff Pike right away." "My cousin can drive us," Theo said reluctantly. "But he'll want $20. Theo's cousin Jack was 17 and had his own car. He agreed to drive them for the money plus a promise that they'd be quick. "I'm not getting arrested for trespassing," he warned as they drove north out of town. 15 minutes, then we're gone. The Ritu, abandoned Hartwell farm sat half a mile off the main road, hidden behind overgrown trees. No one had lived there for decades, not since the Hartwell family had mysteriously left town in the 1960s. The farmhouse was a 2-story wooden structure with broken windows and a sagging roof. Behind it stood a dilapidated barn its doors hanging from rusted hinges. "Wait here," Jack said, parking behind some trees. "Honk if anyone comes." Briar and Theo walked through tall, dead grass toward the house. The storm cellar was on the side, its double doors almost hidden by weeds. A heavy chain and padlock secured the handles. "This is it," Briar said, pulling out the key with its blue ribbon. Her hands trembled as she inserted it into the padlock. Perfect fit. The lock clicked open. Theo helped her pull open one of the heavy, wooden doors. Concrete steps led down into darkness. "Good thing I brought this," Theo said, switching on his flashlight. The beam revealed a dirt floor and stone walls. "Ladies first?" Very funny. But Briar led the way down the steps, her heart pounding. The cellar was bigger than she expected, with a high ceiling and wooden support beams. The air smelled musty and damp. Theo's flashlight swept across the space, revealing something unexpected. Maps covered one wall. Weather maps, topographical maps, maps of Pinecrest and surrounding towns. Beside them hung charts with mysterious symbols and numbers. A metal desk held a ham radio and sophisticated-looking equipment with dials and screens. "Whoa," Theo whispered. "What is all this?" "Some kind of weather station, I think." Briar examined the desk. Papers were organized in neat stacks, each labeled with dates and locations. Filing cabinets lined another wall. One drawer labeled 1985 caught her eye. She pulled it open to find folders organized by month. Under January was a thick file, marked Anomalous Event, Pinecrest. Inside were weather readings, newspaper clippings about the blizzard, and photographs of strange light patterns in the sky. Notes in small, precise handwriting filled the margins. "Theo, look at this." She pointed to a photo of swirling lights above Pinecrest during the blizzard. It matched the strange lights Melody had photographed above the factory. "Aliens?" Theo suggested. "Be serious," Briar said, though she wasn't sure what else could explain the lights. In a corner of the cellar stood a large metal cabinet. Unlike everything else, which was organized with scientific precision, this cabinet was locked with a newer padlock. The key from Melody's hideout didn't fit it. "What do you think is in there?" Theo asked. Before Briar could answer, she spotted a small wooden box on a shelf labeled MW Pinecrest Anomaly, 1985, MW Melody Walsh. With shaking hands, Briar opened the box. Inside was a camera, an old-fashioned one that used film, and several rolls of film labeled with dates. The most recent was from the day Melody disappeared. "He has her camera," Briar whispered. "Mr. Crane must have taken it from her. But why would he—" A car door slammed outside. They froze. "Jack wouldn't leave the car," Theo hissed. Footsteps approached the cellar entrance. There was no other way out. "Hide." Briar grabbed the camera box and pulled Theo behind a stack of filing cabinets. They crouched in the shadows as the footsteps came down the stairs. In the dim light filtering from above, Mr. Crane appeared, carrying a grocery bag. He set it on the desk and began unpacking equipment. Batteries, a small device with an antenna, and what looked like a special camera. Briar accidentally bumped the file cabinet. The metal made a soft ping in the quiet cellar. Mr. Crane went still. "Who's there?" They held their breath, but it was too late. Mr. Crane's flashlight beam found them huddled behind the cabinet. "Briar Walsh," he sighed. "I should have known. And you brought a friend." Theo stepped in front of Briar protectively. "We have the key. We're not trespassing." Mr. Crane actually smiled at that. "Technically, since I rent this property, you are. But that's not important right now." He gestured to the desk. "Come out where I can see you." With no choice, they emerged from their hiding spot. Briar clutched Melody's camera box to her chest. "I see you found that," Mr. Crane said, nodding to the box. "I was wondering where she'd hidden the last rolls of film." "You took her camera," Briar accused. "After she disappeared." "No," Mr. Crane said quietly. "I gave her that camera." He pulled out the desk chair and sat down heavily, suddenly looking tired. "I think it's time I explained a few things, starting with who I really am." He reached for his wallet and pulled out an ID card. "My name is Dr. Nathaniel Crane. I'm a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, specializing in unusual atmospheric phenomena." "You're a weatherman?" Theo asked, clearly disappointed. "Not exactly. I study weather anomalies, events that can't be explained by conventional meteorology." He gestured to the maps and equipment. "This is my research station." "What does this have to do with my sister?" Briar demanded. Dr. Crane's face grew somber. "The blizzard of 1985 wasn't a normal storm. It contained atmospheric conditions I've been tracking for years, conditions that create what I call thin spots." Thin spots in what? In the barrier between our world and somewhere else. He must have seen their skeptical faces because he added, "I know how it sounds, but I have evidence." He turned to the ham radio and adjusted some dials. Static filled the cellar. Then a voice emerged from the noise. A girl's voice, distant and strange, but unmistakable. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? This is Melody Walsh from Pinecrest, Maine. I'm trying to reach..." The voice faded back into static. Briar's legs nearly gave out beneath her. "Melody?" she whispered. "That's Melody," Dr. Crane nodded solemnly. "I recorded this 2 weeks after she disappeared. She's not dead, Briar, but she's not in our world anymore." Briar stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "Where is she then?" "That's what I've been trying to figure out," Dr. Crane said. "And what your sister was helping me discover before she vanished into the thin spot herself." Briar felt like the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. "Melody was helping you?" But in her diary, she wrote that someone was watching our house. "She was scared," Dr. Crane shook his head. "Not scared. Curious. She spotted me doing atmospheric readings near your neighborhood and started following me. Eventually, I noticed her watching me and explained my work." "Why would she believe something so impossible?" Theo asked. "Because I showed her evidence, just like I'm showing you." Dr. Crane gestured to the equipment around them. "And because Melody was special. She noticed things others didn't. The strange lights in the sky during certain weather patterns, the way compasses spin wildly during what most people call freak storms." He walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. Inside were sketches that were unmistakably Melody's work, detailed drawings of swirling lights and strange atmospheric conditions. "These are my sisters," Briar whispered. "She had an eye for detail. These observations are more precise than equipment readings sometimes." Dr. Crane's voice held genuine admiration. "We started working together about 2 months before the blizzard. She would document anomalies I couldn't be present for." "But why keep it secret?" Briar asked. "Why not tell our parents?" Dr. Crane laughed sadly. Would they have believed her? Would they have let their 16-year-old daughter help a stranger, study weather phenomena that might be doorways to another place? Briar knew the answer. They wouldn't have believed it. Even now, with everything she'd discovered, her parents had been ready to dismiss the key and Mr. Crane's hint about the storm cellar. So, what happened during the blizzard?" Theo asked, his scientific curiosity clearly piqued. Dr. Crane's face grew somber. It was a perfect storm, literally. Conditions I'd only seen in my theoretical models. I called Melody that morning to tell her to stay home, that this might be the strongest anomaly I'd ever recorded. But she was excited. She wanted to take measurements from different locations in town. "She told us she was going to check on Ms. Fallow," Breyer said, "and she probably did. But she was also taking readings with a special camera I'd given her." He pointed to the box Breyer still clutched. "That camera? It captures light spectrums the human eye can't see." "So, the blizzard created one of your thin spots?" Theo asked. "The biggest I've ever documented. Normally they're small, temporary. A few seconds where the barrier between worlds weakens. But this one..." Dr. Crane pulled out a chart showing massive spikes in readings. "This one was large enough for a person to pass through." "And Melody did," Breyer said quietly. It wasn't a question. "I believe so, though not intentionally." Dr. Crane ran a hand through his hair. "I've spent every day since trying to find a way to reverse the process, to create another stable opening." Breyer's mind was spinning. But where is she? What's on the other side? Another Earth, perhaps. A parallel world. The readings and Melody's transmissions suggest a place very similar to our own, but with differences. He pulled out a notebook filled with transcribed messages. "She's described a pine crest that's both familiar and strange. The geography is the same, but the details are different. If she can talk to you through that radio, why can't she just tell us how to get her back?" Theo asked. "The connections are brief and unpredictable, sometimes clear, sometimes just static, and she's still trying to understand her surroundings." Dr. Crane adjusted some dials on his equipment. "The last transmission we got, she said she'd found others." "Others? You mean more people who disappeared during storms?" Breyer asked, her eyes widening. Dr. Crane nodded. "It would explain a lot of mysterious disappearances over the years, people who vanished during unusual weather events." Breyer thought about what this meant. Melody was alive, not buried under snow or lost in the woods, but alive in another world. All this time, Dr. Crane had been trying to bring her back. "Why didn't you tell us?" she demanded suddenly, anger rising through her shock. "Do you know what my family has been going through? Thinking she was dead? You let us suffer for months." Dr. Crane looked genuinely pained. "I tried, Breyer. I went to Sheriff Pike 2 days after she disappeared with a recording of her voice. He thought it was a cruel prank. When I tried to explain my theory, he threatened to arrest me for interfering with the investigation. But my parents, would they have believed me either? A stranger with wild theories about parallel worlds?" He shook his head. "I decided the best thing I could do was work to bring her back. Then one day you started watching me, just like Melody had. I knew eventually you'd find your way here." Breyer wanted to stay angry, but she understood his reasoning. It was the same reason she'd kept Melody's diary secret at first. No one would have believed it. "So how do we get her back?" she asked. Dr. Crane's face brightened. "That's where I need your help. The film in that camera may contain critical data, and with spring arriving, the atmospheric conditions are beginning to match what we saw before the blizzard." "What do you mean?" Theo asked. "The natural world returns to balance. As the landscape transitions back to its pre-snow state, the conditions that created the thin spot might briefly reappear." Dr. Crane spread out a weather map of Pinecrest. "I've identified where the anomaly was strongest, right where Melody was last seen walking toward Ms. Fallow's house. If my calculations are correct, as the ground fully thaws in that exact spot, we might see another opening." "When?" Briar could hardly breathe. Within days. That's why I've been preparing all this equipment. He gestured to the supplies he'd brought in. I'm building what's essentially an amplifier for the thin spot, a way to stabilize it long enough for a crossing. Briar's mind was racing with possibilities. We need to tell my parents. And Sheriff Pike, Theo added. Dr. Crane nodded. I have enough evidence now that they might believe us. The voice recordings, Melody's drawings, the camera data. But we need to work quickly. The window of opportunity will be brief. For the first time in months, Briar felt real hope. Her sister wasn't gone forever. She was somewhere else, perhaps, trying just as hard to get back as they were trying to reach her. Melody kept her promise, Briar whispered, more to herself than to the others. She found a way to come back. April arrived with warm rains that washed away the last stubborn piles of snow. The frozen world of Pinecrest transformed almost overnight. Tree buds swelled, grass greened, and birds returned from southern migrations. After the longest winter anyone could remember, spring burst forth with surprising energy, as if making up for lost time. At the Walsh house, a different kind of thaw was taking place. I still don't understand all of it, Dad said, rubbing his temples. He, Mom, Briar, and Dr. Crane sat around their kitchen table surrounded by maps, photos, and scientific equipment. But I heard her voice on that recording. That was Melody. Mom wiped tears from her eyes. All this time, I'm sorry I couldn't make anyone believe me sooner, Dr. Crane said. If I'd had more concrete evidence, what matters now is bringing her home, Dad cut in. He'd aged years in the months since Melody disappeared, but today there was color in his face again, a spark in his eyes. Sheriff Pike had been harder to convince. Only after hearing multiple recordings of Melody's voice and examining the scientific data did he reluctantly acknowledge that Dr. Crane's theory might have merit. Even then, he insisted on keeping the information quiet to prevent public panic about parallel dimensions, as he put it. We don't need the whole town involved anyway, Dr. Crane had pointed out. Just your family and my equipment. Now, with April showers softening the ground, strange things began happening in Pinecrest. Lights in homes flickered without explanation. Compasses spun wildly, pointing in impossible directions. Mrs. Garfield's television picked up broadcasts from a station that didn't exist. Old Mr. Peterson claimed he'd seen his long-dead brother walking through his garden at dusk. The fabric between worlds is thinning again, Dr. Crane explained as his instruments recorded the anomalies. Just as I predicted, the return to pre-snow conditions is creating resonances with the original thin spot. Briar didn't pretend to understand all the science, but she recognized the excitement in Dr. Crane's voice. Each day after school, she helped him set up equipment at the spot where Melody had last been seen. The corner of Maple and Elm Streets, halfway between their house and Ms. Fallow's, the device he called an antenna looked like a tall metal pole with copper wires wrapped around it in complex patterns. Solar panels powered a humming box full of electronics. Cables connected everything to a laptop computer that constantly recorded data. What exactly will this do? Briar asked as they adjusted the antenna's position for the 5th time that day. It's like a tuning fork, Dr. Crane explained. When the natural opening begins to form, this will resonate with it, strengthening and stabilizing the connection between worlds. And that will let Melody come through? That's the theory. Dr. Crane didn't mention what might happen if the theory was wrong. He didn't have to. Briar understood the risks. They might make things worse, or the opening might not form at all. Word spread through Pinecrest despite Sheriff Pike's attempts at secrecy. How could it not? with strange equipment appearing at the corner of Maple and Elm. Some thought Dr. Crane was a government scientist studying weather patterns. Others suspected something to do with radio transmissions or geological surveying. A few even guessed closer to the truth, though most dismissed their theories as fantasy. As mid-April approached, Dr. Crane's instruments showed increasing anomalies. The temperature at Maple and Elm would suddenly drop 20 degrees, then return to normal minutes later. Birds avoided the intersection entirely. Most telling of all, a perfect circle of grass there had turned summer green, while the surrounding lawn remained spring pale. "It's happening," Dr. Crane told the Walsh family one evening. "The readings match what I recorded just before the blizzard, but in reverse. The circle of accelerated growth marks the exact spot where the thin place will fully open." "When, Mom?" asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Tomorrow night. The atmospheric conditions will be perfect around sunset." The news spread through town like wildfire. Despite Sheriff Pike's instructions to keep people away, by the next afternoon, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance from the equipment. Friends, neighbors, teachers, all drawn by the hope of witnessing a miracle. Ms. Fallow brought thermoses of hot chocolate. Theo's parents set up chairs. Even Sheriff Pike arrived, ostensibly to maintain order, but clearly as curious as everyone else. As the sun began its descent, Dr. Crane made final adjustments to his equipment. The antenna hummed louder, emitting a blue glow at its tip. The instruments showed readings climbing steadily. "Almost there," he murmured, eyes fixed on his computer screen. "The resonance is building." Briar stood with her parents at the edge of the green circle, heart pounding. After everything, the lonely months, the investigation, the discoveries, it all came down to this moment. "What if it doesn't work?" she whispered to her mother. Mom squeezed her hand. "Then we keep trying. We don't give up on her." The sun touched the horizon. The antenna's hum deepened to a tone that vibrated in Briar's chest. The air above the circle shimmered like heat waves over summer pavement. "It's working!" Dr. Crane shouted. "The readings are off the charts!" The shimmering intensified. Colors that shouldn't exist in nature swirled in the air. The crowd gasped collectively as the space within the circle seemed to waver, like looking through water. "Melody!" Briar called, stepping forward. "Melody! We're here!" The world held its breath. For a long, terrible moment, nothing happened. Then, in the center of the circle, something blue appeared on the ground, small but unmistakable. Melody's wool hat, looking as new as the day she'd disappeared, sat perfectly centered in the green circle. "It's working," Dr. Crane whispered. "The connection is established." Strange lights appeared above the circle, identical to those in Melody's photographs. The antenna glowed brighter, channeling energy into the thinning barrier between worlds. Briar stepped to the edge of the circle, her hand outstretched toward her sister's hat. "Melody, can you hear me? We're waiting for you." As darkness fell, completely, the lights above the circle intensified, and somewhere, impossibly distant, yet somehow right in front of them, Briar heard her sister's voice call her name. "Briar! Is that you?" Melody's voice sounded like it was coming through water, wavering and distant. "Yes!" Briar shouted into the shimmering air. "We're here! Everyone's here!" The crowd had fallen silent, straining to hear. Dr. Crane worked frantically at his equipment, adjusting dials and typing commands into his computer. "The connection is still too weak," he muttered. "I need to increase the resonance." The antenna hummed louder, its blue glow intensifying until it almost hurt to look at. The strange lights above the circle pulsed in rhythm with the antenna. "Your compass," Dr. Crane suddenly called to Briar. "The one from your detective kit. Do you have it?" Briar nodded, pulling the small compass from her pocket. She'd been carrying it everywhere since finding Melody's hideout. "Hold it over the circle. If it spins, we've found the exact center of the thin spot." With trembling hands, Briar extended the compass over her sister's blue hat. The needle whirled wildly, spinning faster than seemed possible. "That's it." Dr. Crane adjusted the antenna to point directly at that spot. "Now, call to her again." "Melody!" Briar's voice cracked with emotion. "Follow my voice! Come toward the blue light." The air within the circle rippled like the surface of a pond. Colors swirled and shifted, forming shapes that weren't quite solid. The crowd gasped as a shadow appeared in the center, human-shaped but hazy, like looking at someone through frosted glass. "I can see something glowing on your side." Melody's voice came stronger now. "It's like a blue star. Is that you?" "It's us!" Mom cried, joining Briar at the edge of the circle. "Melody, honey, walk toward the light." "I'm trying," Melody called back. "It's like walking through jello. Everything's slow and sticky here." Dr. Crane's instruments beeped urgently. "The window is stabilizing, but it won't last long. Maybe 2 minutes at most." "Hurry, Melody!" Dad shouted, his voice breaking. "Please, hurry!" The shadow in the circle grew more distinct. Briar could make out arms, legs, a head of dark curls. Melody was so close, yet still somehow far away, as if separated by an invisible wall. "I can't push through," Melody called, her voice strained. "There's something in the way." Dr. Crane looked up from his computer. "She needs an anchor, something to hold on to that exists in both worlds." "The hat," Briar realized. "Melody, your blue hat, it's right in front of you." "My hat?" Confusion filled Melody's voice. "I lost that during the blizzard." "It's here now," Briar insisted. "Reach down and find it." The shadow bent forward. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then Melody's voice came again, excited now. "I feel it. I can touch something solid." "Grab it," Dr. Crane urged. "Use it to pull yourself through." The air rippled more violently. Static electricity made everyone's hair stand on end. The antenna's hum rose to a pitch that made teeth ache. "The barrier is thinning," Dr. Crane announced. "Almost there." The shadow in the circle grew sharper, colors filling in where there had been only gray before. Briar could see a flash of yellow, Melody's mittens, reaching down for the blue hat. Suddenly, brilliance flooded the circle. A curtain of light seemed to part, and through it stepped a figure. Melody Walsh stood in the center of the green circle, still wearing her winter coat and bright yellow mittens, her dark curls tumbling around her shoulders. She looked exactly as she had on the day of the blizzard. Not a day older, her face flushed with effort, but otherwise unchanged. For one heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the world erupted in sound. Cheers, cries, sobs of joy. Mom and Dad rushed forward, enveloping Melody in their arms. Briar couldn't move, frozen in disbelief that her sister was really there, solid and real. "Briar!" Melody broke free from their parents and threw her arms around her little sister. "You found me! I knew you would!" Briar hugged her so tightly, she worried she might break her. "You promised you'd come back," she whispered. Over the joyful chaos, Dr. Crane's voice cut through. "The portal is closing! Everyone step back!" The antenna's light was fading, the swirling colors above the circle dissipating like smoke in the wind. But as everyone moved back, they realized Melody wasn't alone. She was carefully cradling something in her arms. "What's that?" Briar asked, peering at the small object Melody held protectively against her chest. With a smile that seemed both joyful and mysterious, Melody revealed what she'd brought back with her. A small potted plant with leaves unlike anything Briar had ever seen, translucent and faintly blue, with delicate veins that pulsed with their own inner light. "It's from the other side," Melody explained as the crowd gathered around to see. "They call it starlight bloom. It only grows there, not here." "It's extraordinary," Dr. Crane whispered, his scientific curiosity clearly piqued. "A plant from another world." Sheriff Pike pushed his way forward. "You're saying you brought something back from wherever you were?" Melody nodded, her face suddenly serious. "I had to. It's proof of what I found there." "And what exactly did you find?" Dr. Crane asked, his instruments forgotten as he stared at the glowing plant. Melody looked around at the crowd of familiar faces, at her parents still clutching her arms as if afraid she might disappear again, at Briar, whose eyes were wide with wonder. Then she smiled, a smile that held secrets and marvels, and things beyond imagination. "Another Pinecrest," she said, "just like ours, but different in 1,000 small ways. The houses are the same but painted different colors. The people have the same names, but different lives." She paused, looking directly at Briar. "And I wasn't alone there." "What do you mean?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "There were others, people who disappeared during strange storms over the years. Mr. Peterson's brother, who vanished during a lightning storm in '63. A family from Augusta, lost during a fog in '79. Even some from other states, who somehow found their way to Pinecrest. On the other side." Dr. Crane's face lit with excitement. "My theory was right. The thin spots have been occurring for decades, maybe centuries." Melody nodded. "They've built a community there. They helped me survive, taught me about that world." She stroked the glowing plant's leaves tenderly. "They've been trying to find a way back, but the connections are rare and unpredictable." "So there are more people trapped there?" Sheriff Pike asked, his professional demeanor returning. "How many?" 17, Melody said, "and they're waiting." A hush fell over the crowd as the implications sank in. 17 people, thought lost forever, were actually alive in another world. 17 families who, like the Walshes, had grieved without closure. "That's why I had to come back first," Melody explained. "To tell you they're alive, to help Dr. Crane understand how to make the connection stronger, more stable." She smiled at her little sister. "And because I promised Briar, I would." As the excitement spread through the crowd, people rushing to tell others the miraculous news, Melody pulled Briar aside. In the glow of the streetlights now coming on as evening deepened, her sister's face looked both familiar and somehow changed, marked by experiences Briar couldn't imagine. "I knew you wouldn't give up," Melody whispered. "I left clues hoping you'd find them." "The blue ribbon," Briar said. "The map, the camera. I found them all." Melody hugged her again. "You're the best detective in 2 worlds, Squirt." As they walked home, the glowing plant lighting their way, Melody leaned close to Briar's ear. "You won't believe where I've been, Briar," she whispered. "And you won't believe who else is there, waiting to come home." Briar looked up at her sister, at the stars appearing in the clear spring sky, at the familiar streets of Pinecrest that now seemed filled with new mystery and possibility. The blizzard of 1985 had buried their town in snow and taken her sister away. But when that snow melted, it had revealed something no one could have imagined. a doorway to another world, and the promise of more reunions to come. Winter's grip had finally released Pinecrest, and with spring had come not just new life, but second chances for those long thought lost. All because one girl had refused to stop believing that her sister would keep her promise to return. That's the end of our story. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Where are you listening from? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this tale, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support gives me the motivation to create more stories like this one.